Hello everyone, and welcome to the Deeply Renegade podcast. My name is Molly, also known as the Deeply Renegade, and I'd like to welcome you guys to episode 349. Today is Saturday, December 26, 2020, and I'm glad you could join me today. It's a pretty beautiful day. This is second coffee. There will be third coffee later, I guess, but anyway. So we'll see how this episode ends up turning out. It was definitely, or what would it be? Definitely succeeded in having a Christmas that did not feel like every other day during the quarantine, which was good. So there was good food and Christmas candy and talking with various relatives, and it was pretty good. And then we got to do our normal Christmas tradition, which is playing board games until late into the night. I didn't win any. I only made the Jersey Level 1 nervous voice. Oh well. So, such is life. Since I talked to you guys last, I actually have managed to knit a surprise project. Hey! So as I was going about the business of putting everything away after, after walking to Firebird Yarns in order to take part in the 70% off sale, I just decided that I wanted to cast on my DK weight blue gradient with my light fingering alpaca silk cloud yarn and knit a brioche thing out of it. And for some reason I was thinking this was just going to be a one evening project. It took 4. Oh dear. So it is sitting on the chair behind me, so I should actually grab the right thing. So this is knit out of the Shoppable Gradient, which is a label which is entirely in German, and the Alpaca Silk Cloud that was dyed by, I believe, Catherine at Firebird Yarns. And I just did like this crazy freestyle brioche thing. So I decided to put some chevrons in it, and then I decided that I didn't want to think that much, and so then this part of the shawl doesn't have very much adornment to it. And then I did do a little zig at the end, but I'm not sure whether or not it was intentional enough to really see. But whatever. So this is the green side, so this is out of the Creep Blood colorway, and this side is the Stonewashed colorway. So I started on this end, and the gradient proceeds like so. But the way that I end up wearing it, and definitely Molly colors going on there. I definitely appreciate the contrast that I get with the darker colors on the green, but the lighter colors are fine too. They just don't show up quite as well. It's super snuggly and not too crazy. So Firebird Yarns, 74% Surrey alpaca, 26% silk. And I do have leftovers of this, which I knew was going to happen. Because this was like 320 yards and 50 grams. And then this is the Shoppable Gradient, which was 100 grams, and what would it be? And 260 meters. So that would mean, or would it be? So on the DK side of the spectrum, and this is sort of on the light figuring, because this is like, or what it would be. So it'd be, if this was 320, it'd be like, what, 740? So it's pretty close to lace weight. What's cool about the alpaca silk cloud is that it's actually a boucle. So I found that to be really interesting. I'm trying to see if there's any good way of sort of showing the boucle structure for you. So there are basically like little loop-de-doos in the alpaca as you're knitting it, and you really can't tell when it's in the skein. But it was fun to work with. It was an entertaining little project, and now I don't need to put it in the I don't need to put it in the stash. So you can wear it, or what would it be? So this, or words. So this is just freestyle. So what I ended up doing was I did something maybe a little bit reversed from other brioche shawls that I've done before. So I started off making the continuous side, the green side, but because the yarn was so light, it looked pretty sloppy, so I had to switch to having my closed side be the blue side. I tried holding it together, which was sort of fun and festive, but I knew wouldn't make as big of an object as if I had alternated. But I knew that because I had way more yardage of the green fluff, that I made that the perimeter color, because I know you use more yarn in the perimeter color. And so this increase edge here, which has 1 into 5 increases on it, is pretty darn tight. So that's why I'm wearing that as the edge on my neck, because it holds the shape really nicely. Then you can see all of the fun pattern this way. But I ended up doing a doubled purl two together style bind off, I think. I don't recall which one that's who that's attributed to or not, but so that made this edge very stretchy. Nominally, it should have turned out that it should just be a pizza wedge. So, based on my increase rate, I should be looking at a shawl that is 22.5 degrees and a straight up slice. But, meh, whatever. So, the alpaca makes it super, super duper snuggly. The blue makes it totally my sort of jam, because I wouldn't have normally selected this acidy green yarn, but with the little pops of blue in it, I knew that it would look really cute with the DK, and I think I succeeded in that regard. And then as I was, so after I'd sort of settled on what was my continuous side going to be, which was the blue, and what my background was going to look like, which was the green, then it was just a matter of doing that 5 stitch in whatever, that 1 into 5 increase every time I came around to blue. And then I was starting to get a little bored with just the straight up plain brioche, so then I started to whack in some increases and decreases to make the little chevron pattern on it. So and there wasn't too much of a plan to it, so it worked out. Maybe if I had selected a different style of increases, I don't know, I'm not sure what I would have ended up doing for that one. Yeah. It's a little bit mind-bending because, or would it be just because when you're working in brioche, you are working with odd numbers in order to maintain sort of that 1x1 rib sort of texture. So basically, so that means that the normal rates that you would use for something that wasn't in that whatever ribbing sort of pattern would be slightly broken, so it's a little bit harder to do, or whatever, it's a little bit more mind-bending to figure out what shaping you choose in order to create certain shawl shapes. But I wanted something that was a little bit more scarfy, even though it did end up turning out to be a pretty big shawl shape in the end. And just like trying to use up as much of the yarn as possible. Well, and it was the case where I don't have any of the leftovers of the gradient to show you, because I actually ran out of yarn. So I'll just quick show you. So the yarn was just beginning to do like a transition back into a lighter color, and so at the very, very end, I needed to put in a little bit of plied yarn. But I did have some of this yarn. You can see sort of the ply structure on the screen. But it was a close enough match where it's good enough. It was pretty good, all things considered. Because I did want to use it all. I didn't want to rip back a row just to do that. And what was actually really cool about the way they actually did this yarn itself, I'm trying to pull up a section which actually has the gradient in it, is that how they created the gradient was actually how they were feeding the fiber into it. So what ends up happening is that at the transition point, we'll see whether or not we can actually get it to show up nicely. But as it goes from the lighter blue to the navy blue, they started throwing in more darker colors. And so you can see in the yarn patches of the lighter and dark as it goes through its little color change thing. Not so sure it's easy to show here, but it did end up making, this yarn was dyed in the wool. It was not dyed in the skein. So that was cool. So no designer but myself. No pattern aside from what I already knew about how shawls and brioche worked. What would it be? No specific chart that I ended up pulling in order to create that. But it was a fun little project. We can debate if it would have been faster to just spend 5 minutes putting in the stash. It would have been faster to just put in the stash, but oh well. It would be the case where with my other knitting projects right now, I'm a little bit bored. I'm not super into it at the moment, so there's that. And I don't know if it was just the case where there's like generic like fatigue right now, like maybe I should get some more sleep, but for some reason it's just not really working right now. So it was the case where I was knitting tired, but we'll see how things are different today. So what I ended up starting on last night was, or would it be? So what has happened is that I have finished both arms of my Joris the 5th and the 6th. So they now have little hands and little arms, and their little shoulders are no longer quite so contained. I did end up getting 6mm safety eyes, which might be like a little small. It looks like my other Joris probably has 7 or 9mm safety eyes, but I didn't measure before I ordered, so whatever. So I now have 23 more pairs of safety eyes to go. Because I just ordered them on Amazon, because it seemed silly to pay, or would it be, the price for 50 of them was the same as buying 2. So I know that I do on occasion make toys, and there probably will be more toys to make, so I might as well do that. And then what I have going on right now is that I have pulled off a leg. I was sort of going actually autopilot on it and needed to go back a smidge because it turned out that the leg was actually a little bit, or you don't do as many decreases on the leg. The leg is in fact bigger than the arm. Not by a lot, just 2 stitches, but so there is that. But I was working on it last night and just ended up getting over it. Today is a new day. Perhaps it will end up going a little bit better. Or it's just the case where knitting my little tight diameter tube just wasn't where I was at right now. So this guy is knit out of Urban Girls yarn in the Virginia Fingering in the Loud and Proud colorway, and it is turning out super gorgeous and delightful. Very, very happy with how this guy is turning out. But like, there's not a lot of work left to do now that I have the eyes. Like, there really isn't very much stopping me aside from just being not quite into the project at the moment. The other guy has both arms, has its little beady eyes. And I am knitting this Joris out of the Sassy Sheep Renaissance in the peacock color. So definitely much more of your, or would it be, the Urban Girls yarn would be like speckle-tastic, non-color repeat sort of yarn. I'm holding it doubled, but I probably could have held it singled and it would have been non-pooling as well. This guy is more of your hand-painted in blocks style yarn, and so it is pooling at depending on what the diameter ends up being. So this guy has a purple and green belly and a blue back because I hit that pooling, whatever that pooling stitch count on this guy. And then one arm is more marbled and the other arm is more stripy because the colors were lining up on top of each other. So whatever. So what's up next is getting the legs on this guy. I don't know if I will alternate or if I will do something else. I definitely totally picked the wrong end to pick out the seam on, so my yellow waste yarn is cut up into little bits somewhat. There was like a method to my madness, but apparently I forgot. Big reach. And here is the yarn in the skein. I'm probably going to knit baby hats with the leftovers of this one. I'm not so sure if I'll have lots of leftovers of the Urban Girl yarn, but this one was 150 grams skein. What I do love about this project is that what it is allowing me to do is to take some single skeins of fingering weight out of my stash and knit them into a single project, and sort of take those, or would it be, take the cheeky purchases and turn them into something cool. So, not too crazy there. But it may be the case where I end up needing to take a break for a while on knitting them, just because, yeah. It feels like it's been a little too soon. And then, oh, I didn't even weigh this, but because I had my my cheeky cast on and finish. I ended up not getting tons of progress on my Viajante this week. I was expecting to really crank on this, and I ended up, other things happened instead. But this is my Viajante, and this isn't too far off in terms of, well, wherever you see that it's dark, it's probably purple. It's a nice, very reddish purple. But this is the Viajante. It is very gorgeous, very gorgioso. So I've made some progress, but not a ton. So I forgot to properly move the marker, so I made an estimate. But as you can see, I didn't get a lot of rows done this week. It is growing at about a row around, but, or not a row around, it's growing stitch count, a stitch around on average. So it will continue to grow and grow and grow, but I will move my marker and call that good for now. So it was very nice knitting for various, whatever. Is it just one Zoom or more than one Zoom? I don't know. What would it be? It's perfect board game knitting. It's perfect talking with people on video conference knitting. So I'm not too concerned about being able to work on it and get it done. And it probably will end up being my main project for a while, unless I end up getting distracted. Options. So, but it's not very exciting knitting. I have to have the right entertainment for it. So there's that. So this is going to be going to my cousin. I have selected the beads, and all of those pieces are coming together. And I'm still using my Anchorworks Lazy Kate and Yarn Caddy. So that mostly, or what would it be? There seems to be like the right height it needs to be relative to me for it to feed yarn nicely, but don't always get that situation set up. So where my table is at and where I'm sitting down here is sort of that right height. But if I'm sitting on the couch and I have it on one of my side tables, maybe not perfect. But it should be okay. So one funny little project that I ended up doing. So I had recently finished carding up the final bats for my Three Waters Farm Finn sweater spin. And I'd been doing some cleaning up in the room, and I'd found some of my crumb tray fiber. So basically fiber that I ended up removing from my drum carder because it was like a little bit too short, or things that got stuck on the wicker in, things that ended up in the crumb tray. So what I ended up doing was I roughly ended up combining it into this like super duper cute little mini. So I spun this on my Jenkins Finch, and not a whole lot of time. Bring it in. Maybe focus. So I'm seeing some sparkle in here. I'm seeing some of the orange and brown that I had from my Something Wicked, and some other combo spin, and then the background blue of the fin. So pretty fun little skein, not really amounting to very much yardage at all, but I just thought it was like a fun little project to spin up. So just a little lace weight 2-ply for funsies. What let's see if we can actually get this one into the frame. Ooh, we are just barely into the frame. So I am working on my background blue bat. I don't feel like I ended up getting a lot of progress done this week. But such is life. And like we've got some of the bobbin in here. There we go. This is artfully perched. So filling up the bobbin. The bobbin will be pretty much full by the time I'm done, so I'm not quite halfway on the singles here. We shall see about how much I can manage to accomplish in like this week if I end up focusing on one project versus the other. It would be really nice to finish it before the new year, but that's like a week away too. I'm also not sure if I want to spend that whole week spinning. So I'm assuming that there will be more board games and lounging about with the Dear Sweet Lovable one, because we're both off work right now. Not a lot to do. Maybe I'll take my wheel down into his fishy lair and offer moral support while I spin. We'll see. We haven't taken time off of this magnitude since our honeymoon in Hawaii. And it isn't like we're going to be quite as occupied because we're just hanging out at home. So all we have is it's just us and our stuff. And it would be nice to have less stuff. So there will probably be a little bit of reconfiguration of the knitting room in the coming days. Need to get a piece of furniture out of here in order to make things a little bit more comfy and easy to go. We shall see. I'm also thinking as a fun special to do, now that I have like a pretty nice, or would it be, using the lovely tripod, not too crazy. So as a fun thing that I wanted to do was actually, my plan is to do a big flash of the stash for the new year. It's my tradition, which allows me to go through all my yarn, make sure that I have pictures and stash entries for everything. Like the Sassy Sheep, for example, did not have a stash entry, and that, yeah. Everything gets to be well quantified and all of that fun. That actually makes me wonder whether or not I made a stash entry for my seismic yarn either, but that has been put away safe and sound. So I thought that would end up being a lot of fun to do as a live on YouTube. I do have a lot of, or would it be, it has been entertaining doing some lives on Instagram as well, so I ended up doing one yesterday before I hopped on to my family's, or my nuclear family Zoom. So I did one where I unwrapped all of my tie-dye t-shirts. So fiber adjacent. Basically what it boils down to was back in July I bought the tulip tie-dye kit. I did like a little bit of research, and it looks like what Tulip uses is the Dharma Procyon MX dye. And so there definitely are some very different things going on with dyeing for cellulose fibers. So an interesting thing is that so they don't actually activate until you get them wet, but you want them to disassociate appropriately, so that's why those dyes end up only being good for like at most 72 hours, because you need to get them wet in order for the two components to separate. But what you want to have happen is you want your dye particles to covalently bond to your cotton or linen and not make sweet, sweet love to the water instead. And the longer you have it in water, the more likely it is to go team water instead of team cotton. So that was interesting. But part of the reason why I ended up getting the kit was like, I just don't even know. So it came with rubber bands, instructions, 3 different squeeze bottles, dye already in the squeeze bottles, and all you had to do was add water. And I ended up tie-dyeing 10 t-shirts. I'm wearing one of them right now, so this is a spiral design that I ended up doing. And I think in the end, I really did like the spirals the best. I also did, oh, I don't even know how stuff ended up. I did a shibori technique where you take a PVC pipe and a pair of rubber bands and wrap the shirt around the pipe. And then I ended up dyeing lines on that one. So that ended up turning, that when I ended up revealing them to myself because I wanted to keep reusing the pipe. So I ended up unwrapping those, being like, wow, this is a really cool effect. And I did several shirts that way. I even did a couple of shirts where I tied it up once, dyed it, and then tied it up wrapping from another direction in order to get color as many places as possible. But when I unwrapped the shirts later, it's like, eh. I'm also, or would it be the case where everything looks so much more saturated wet. And also everything looks a lot more saturated when you have unrinsed dye that's attached to water instead of cotton in it. So the colors aren't quite as saturated as they were that day. It's possible I wasn't working at quite a hot enough temperature. So there's like the two-edged sword with fiber reactive dyes, so you don't want them to be too hot because that will actually, or would it be, if you make the dye stock hot, it'll last a much, much shorter time. So maybe I needed to heat them, basically what I ended up. But the other interesting thing about fiber reactive dyes is that while it's setting, it has to stay damp. So, you know, all sorts of crazy things, but I was sort of happy to end up learning more about it. So I shall quick run through the t-shirts now that they are rinsed and washed and dried. And this one is on the top, and this one is probably actually the most saturated of them all. So this one is mostly teal with 2 different, like, and then a stripe, and then ended up doing a little bit of green and a little bit of the navy in it. So this was a spiral, so I ended up taking the center, rotating it around, and then I actually sort of split it into 8s, basically. So 4 of my 8s were teal, 2 of them were blue in opposite corners, and the other 2 opposite corners were green. This had full strength dye in it, but I realized actually pretty quickly that I was going to, or would it be, the kit says you can dye 9 t-shirts with the 3 bottles. But I noticed that I was halfway through the dye after 3 shirts. So what I ended up doing was, after I'd sort of emptied the bottle to about the halfway mark, I filled it back up with water again, and that resulted in more diluted color. So this shirt is lighter than this guy. So I definitely liked the more saturated colors that I got with these earlier ones. So I probably shouldn't have dyed as many shirts as I did. And then one like this one is done pretty close to the end as well, but because I used more navy on this one, it did end up turning out more saturated. But a really nice spiral pattern. I do like my spirals very much. San Francisco is known for their love of tie-dye, so in this regard, it's not too crazy. This is one of the shiburi ones that I ended up doing. So you can see those vertical lines are from how I was wrapping and dyeing. And then those 45-degree lines are sort of a different one of that. Oh, come on, camera. See my face? There we go. So I have sort of horizontal and vertical lines on this one. So I did 2 rounds of shiburi on this guy. But this one was towards the end, so the colors are pretty faded in comparison. But, oh well, such is life. This is, I think, my first shiburi one, and so this one ended up being much more of a random pattern, which I thought was pretty cool. It was like, wow, this is gorgeous, I need to keep doing that. It's only later that I'm like, maybe that wasn't the best idea. And here is one of the other shiburi ones, so it'd be the case where you can see some of the 45-degree lines, some of the horizontal lines, and some that are maybe a little bit more vertical. And this one was one that I dyed more than once in order to get good coverage on it. And I think that this is the last shiburi one, so this one was definitely towards the end of my dye, so not too crazy there. But I have the horizontal lines and the vertical lines that you can see, so vertical lines on the sleeve and horizontal on the body. Got this one. All right, 3 more to go. This is my mop shirt. So if you've watched videos from Rebecca of Chemknits, she likes to keep a skein of yarn nearby in order to soak up any dye that's left over. And that's what I was doing here. So this was the last shirt that I ended up dyeing, that I did quite a bit of dilution on it to just use as much of the dye as possible. But whenever I had like a lot of dye in my, when I had a lot of dye sort of pooled up in my bucket, I would just take the shirt, soak it up, call it good. So it was a good way of getting a little bit of color coverage on it beyond just the straight up blue. But all in all, I think this ended up turning out really nice. Most of what I had left over was the navy, which is surprising. But, yeah, such is life. Let's see. This is one of the ones that was towards the end. So this is what I did with this one was a shiburi folding technique. So what I ended up doing was making like an accordion fold with this guy. And that's where you can see sort of the white sections on this are actually where the fabric was folded. And I did really chunky folds on this one, so the colors were fairly, or would it be, the places where there was color and not color were pretty thick on this one. And then the other angle that you're seeing there was that I had ties at various intervals, and that's where I ended up applying the dye. So I had 2 sections of navy, a section of teal, and a section of green. So it turned out pretty decent. This one was one of the much later ones that I ended up doing, so the color saturation isn't quite as high. The teal and green didn't quite seem to stick quite as well. But one of the early ones that I ended up doing turned out amazing. So I did much, much smaller pleats, so probably closer to like an inch or so. And then I had a couple more sections that I ended up tying up. Wake up, computer. And oh my gosh, and this was when I was still using the full strength dye, and it is so good. So I have the diagonal lines of color running one way, and then the folds were running the other, and it just turned out super cute. Super cute. Very excited about this one. So shiburi is a Japanese tradition of dyeing. where you end up manipulating the fabric in order to create patterns of resist and places for dye to land. And I would say this was definitely a huge success in trying out a new technique and having it turn out really great. And while the wrapping was super duper fun, I'm not sure what ended up happening, but the saturation just didn't seem to be quite the same after the end. I'm not quite sure what ended up going weird there. But at this point, I am out of t-shirts to dye. I'll have to wait a couple of years before I accumulate more free white t-shirts. Whatever. At this point, I just have like one white t-shirt, which I decided would probably be better staying white than getting dyed. I did have like a couple of gray t-shirts that I ended up pulling out, but I only ended up dyeing the one. Whatever, as you do. But in the future, now that I have these cute little dye bottles, what I can do is use that for acid dyeing purposes, or if I decide that I want to do tie-dye shirts in the future, I can get dye directly from whatever, one of the various dye houses out there, and be able to mix my own strength stuff, basically. So like a kit like that is fairly expensive, but I was missing a decent number of the accoutrements anyways. And they recommend that you just cut the rubber bands, but I'm totally using these again. So I will put my used rubber bands with my not used rubber bands. I was afraid I was going to run out, but it turned out they provided plenty. They provided plenty for my purposes. And I did end up, for this shirt here, I ended up using some of my cotton rug warp, and it also dyed all sorts of entertaining colors as well. It used to be a darker color, but now it is less saturated. So they were a real pain to remove though. So not sure that I would do that again. But what was nice about it was that, would it be, for that folding technique, manipulating rubber bands to do that was super annoying. Which is why I had less sections of color in my last fold, or whatever, one of my later folded shirts, was just because it was annoying to manipulate the rubber bands in that way. As you do. But in terms of visual impact, it was worth it. So it may be the case where doing that technique, it's just a lot easier to tie strings in specific spots and just call it good. And there wasn't anything super duper scientific about what I was doing. I was just sort of taking my wet t-shirt on the ground, swirling it, putting some rubber bands on in order to hold all of the pieces together, and then coloring it in like a pie. So not too crazy. It was definitely like a fun fight. Like, I don't know. It's not a yarn adjacent thing, but it definitely is a fiber thing. So not too crazy there. And I'm very excited because all of my other tie-dye shirts are not in my favorite colors. So I probably had to retire my rainbow one. I'm definitely all about the rainbows, but it was really nice to be like, oh yeah, now I have 10 shirts that are like blue, green, and teal. And so that'll be super duper exciting. And if you weren't paying attention to some of the numbers on them, a lot of these shirts are, what would it be? Like, a few of them aren't that old at all, but some of them are from college, and college was 11 to 15 years ago, so what would it be? I've had these shirts for a while. So they will be given a new lease on life with their new bright happy colors. So that was entertaining, but it'll be a while before I do it again. Unless I get into fabric dyeing, which would also probably mean that I would have to get into sewing. And while I am curious, I have not yet tipped over that edge. As you do. So, it looks like we're going to have a nice long episode today. I had a lot to talk about. There may not have been as much knitting as I was hoping to get done, but whatever. This is not the case where I was very dedicated in my watching of, I don't even know what I was, who knows where would be at. Like, Thanksgiving was a much more knitting focused vacation. This one's like, meh. So, shouldn't be too crazy. So let's see. We'll be recording again next week. There will likely be 2 videos next week. One of them will be live of me putting out the stash and doing my great stash picture, and we'll figure out whether or not I'm doing it in this room or if I'm doing it in the living room. It depends on which one of these rooms is cleaner. And by cleaner, I mean less cluttered. And then a regular podcast episode as per usual. And I hope that, what would it be? Everyone had a pretty decent Christmas if you celebrate. And I hope that in this end of the year time, that whatever, we have some space to relax and enjoy and chill out. And I'm really hoping that, what would it be, like, whatever, a heartfelt hug to you from me, because what would it be? It's been a crazy year, guys. It would be. Like, it hasn't been all terrible, but there's definitely been a decent amount of terrible this year. So, because yeah, this is my last episode for 2020, so so shouldn't be too crazy. But with that, I hope you guys have a lovely week, and I look forward to talking to you guys in 2021. Alright, bye-bye, take care.